Good evening. With over 900 pages of newly released documents which expose the true nature of the type of research we were funding over at the Wuhan Virology Lab, well, Dr. Fauci seems to have landed in some hot water. That's because over the last 6 months, he has, on multiple occasions, denied that America was funding gain-of-function research over in China. However, these documents, they seem to suggest otherwise. And so, not only are senators now seeking answers, but Dr. Fauci has now also been referred to the Department of Justice for potentially lying to Congress. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman, from the Epoch Times. And now, let's begin today's discussion by talking about Dr. Anthony Fauci. We already discussed in a previous episode how a treasure trove of newly released documents obtained by The Intercept show that the NIAID, which is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the department that's run by Dr. Fauci, how they funded virus enhancement research over at the Wuhan lab. Specifically, these documents contain a grant proposal from the EcoHealth Alliance, which is an American-based health organization run by Dr. Peter Daszak, and the grant proposal was titled Understanding the Risk of Bad Coronavirus Emergence. And this proposal was indeed accepted, and over the course of 5 years, the NIAID, under the leadership of Dr. Fauci, gave the EcoHealth Alliance $3.1 million to conduct the research, including almost $600,000 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology used to identify as well as alter bad coronaviruses that were deemed likely to infect humans. Here's specifically how The Intercept, who's again the publication which initially obtained these documents, here's how they describe it. The Bad Coronavirus Grant provided EcoHealth Alliance with a total of $3.1 million, including $599,000 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology used in part to identify and alter bad coronaviruses likely to infect humans. And when you actually dig through the grant proposal for yourself, well, it actually specifically warns about the potential dangers that are associated with the type of research that they were conducting. Here's specifically what Peter Daszak wrote, quote, "Field work involves the highest risk of exposure to SARS or other coronaviruses while working in caves with high bad density overhead and the potential for fecal dust to be inhaled. Furthermore, these documents include information on experimental work that was being done over at the Wuhan lab on humanized mice, which, according to a professor over at Rutgers University who had a chance to study these documents, he said that this research involved altering viruses to make them more pathogenic. The materials confirm the grant supported the construction in Wuhan of novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses that combined a spike gene from one coronavirus with genetic information from another coronavirus and confirmed the resulting viruses could infect human cells. The materials further reveal for the first time that one of the resulting novel laboratory-generated SARS-related coronaviruses, one not been previously disclosed publicly, was more pathogenic to humanized mice than the starting virus from which it was constructed. And thus, not only was reasonably anticipated to exhibit enhanced pathogenicity, but indeed was demonstrated to exhibit enhanced pathogenicity. And this is exactly where things get a little sticky. Because if you've been following the news, you know that over the last several months, on several different occasions, when Dr. Fauci was asked before Congress whether his agency was funding gain-of-function research over in China, he said that it wasn't. For instance, just a few months ago, when Dr. Fauci was sitting before a congressional panel, he was asked directly to defend the $600,000 grant which was given to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And during his testimony, Dr. Fauci insisted that they were not funding gain-of-function research. Rather, he claimed that the purpose of the $600,000 grant was to study the animal-human interface, to do surveillance, and to determine if these bad viruses were even capable of transmitting infection to humans. And so again, he made that statement before a House subcommittee. Then, on the very next day, when Dr. Fauci was sitting in front of a Senate committee, he had this exchange with Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. "How do you know they didn't lie to you and use the money for gain-of-function research anyway?" To which Dr. Fauci replied, "You never know." However, it seems like, according to these newly released documents right here, you can know. Because, again, what these documents disclose specifically is the fact that we gave the Wuhan Institute of Virology almost $600,000 to conduct research, which included altering bad coronaviruses that were deemed likely to infect humans, which very obviously seems to contradict what Dr. Fauci claimed in terms of the gain-of-function research that we were not funding. And it's exactly this revelation from these documents which has caused lawmakers to begin the process of seeking answers. For instance, here's what Rand Paul, who is both a senator as well as a medical doctor, here's what he said during an interview on Fox News just yesterday. I find that hard to believe that we still would have someone with such poor judgment who believes that even a pandemic would be worth it, that this person is in charge of the research for our government. I find that astounding. I think it's such incredibly poor judgment that he should be immediately removed. Furthermore, Senator Rand Paul said that it's not only an issue of Dr. Fauci being removed from his post. Here's what he added. We've referred it to the Department of Justice. I don't think Biden's Department of Justice will do anything with it, but yes, it is very dangerous to have public officials who we need to have trust in coming and lying to us. But Fauci has lied dozens of times. During that interview, he further added that lying to Congress is a felony punishable by up to 5 years of jail time. And then likewise, Senator Tom Cotton, who is a Republican from Arkansas, he expressed a similar sentiment, saying that Dr. Fauci should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Here's what he said. You know, for 18 months, he's been saddling up his moral high horse and clucking his tongue at college kids who want to go celebrate a football game in an outdoor stadium on a nice fall day, or parents who don't want their kindergartners to have to wear masks their entire lives, telling you have to wear 3 masks, when all along he's been lying not just to Congress, but to the American people about his role in funding the very reckless, dangerous research at a Chinese communist lab that unleashed this pandemic on the world. Furthermore, in a letter that was released by the minority Senate leaders in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the Subcommittee on Health, as well as the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, they asked for more answers as well as accountability. Here's specifically what this statement says in part, quote, for months, Dr. Fauci dismissed any consideration of the lab leak theory despite, or perhaps because of, his agency's involvement in risky coronavirus research at the Wuhan lab. Dr. Collins has repeatedly denied what these documents now show. This is why we began asking these questions in March. Unfortunately, Dr. Collins and the Biden administration have refused to comply with our oversight. Now, I just want to pause here for a quick moment. The oversight that they are referring to here is regarding an investigation into the origins of COVID that was being conducted by the Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce for the past 6 months. If you want to dig deeper into the investigation that they've been conducting, I'll throw a link to it in the description box below. However, the letter continues, quote, if the NIH, the NIAID, and EcoHealth Alliance have been transparent about research being conducted at the Wuhan lab from the beginning, perhaps it would have aided in our response to the global pandemic. But every step of the way, they have chosen to obfuscate and mislead. These documents raise more questions about what kind of risky research Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins have been funding and what other information they refuse to give us. Now, thus far, Dr. Fauci has not given any public comments on this 900-page treasure trove of documents obtained by The Intercept. In fact, we here at the Epoch Times, we did reach out to the NIAID, but we have yet to hear back. However, we did also reach out to the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and they did respond to us. Here's what they said. NIH has never approved any research that would make a coronavirus more dangerous to humans. The research we supported in China, where coronaviruses are prevalent, sought to understand the behavior of coronaviruses circulating in bats that have the potential to cause widespread disease. The body of science produced by this research demonstrates that the bat coronavirus sequences published from that work that NIH supported were not SARS-CoV-2. However, according to the details of the experiments which were listed in these newly released documents, they seem to suggest that there were alterations being made to bat coronaviruses over at the Wuhan lab. And so I guess we'll just have to wait until the next congressional hearing and see how Dr. Fauci explains this apparent discrepancy. However, before we zoom out and look at this issue more broadly, I'd like to take a quick second and introduce our sponsor for today's episode, and I will do so from the sound booth. That's right, Roman. Although today we're not in the sound booth, we're in a living room looking area. In fact, take a look at this. So this right here is what's known as a US dollar. And in my opinion, with the way that the government is acting right now, printing these things into oblivion, unfortunately, within probably one generation, this is just my opinion, I don't give any financial advice, but this likely will not be the world's reserve currency any longer. Which is why every single month what I do is I get one of these boxes delivered to me from American Hartford Gold. And American Hartford Gold is a phenomenal gold dealer. They don't only sponsor my channel, they're one of my favorite gold dealers to work with. And every single month, I buy gold and silver from them because I believe that it had value 5,000 years ago, it has value today, and it'll likely have value well into the future. And take a look at these beautiful pieces that they send me. You got these beautiful 1 ounce silver American Walking Liberties here. And then you have this beautiful 1 ounce Canadian maple. I don't know if you can see how shiny that is. It's beautiful. Yeah, and right, if you order from American Hartford Gold, they have a special going on for our watchers, for our viewers. If depending on how much you buy, they'll send you $1,500 worth of free silver, and on top of that, they'll send you a very special gift right here. I'll take a look and show you what it is. By the way, American Hartford Gold, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They're super friendly and nice to work with. When you call them, not only are their staff friendly, but if they put you on hold, their hold music is a speech from Ronald Reagan, so I never even mind when I have to hold it a little bit. And yeah, they're just awesome. They can send you physical gold and silver to your doorstep, or they can deposit it directly into your IRA account, making the whole thing super simple. And not only will they send you for silver, they'll also send you this hat, which has written on it everything you need to survive a crisis: God, gold, and guns. So claim your $1,500 worth of free silver and your free hat. You can click on the link in the description box below, or give them a call at 866-242-2352, or text Roman to 65532. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, one thing that I believe is really worth mentioning is how the official narrative around where this virus began has changed dramatically over the last several months. And please note that I say official narrative, because the facts, they were always there. It's just that the corporate media outlets in this country decided to dismiss them, and social media companies, they didn't even allow us to talk about it for a very long time. In fact, last year, you likely already know that we here at the Epoch Times, we produced an awesome documentary where we worked to track down the origin of the virus. Now, in that documentary, we did not make any definitive conclusions, but we did uncover and present evidence that seemed to suggest that the virus might have leaked out of the Wuhan virology lab. That was based on our investigative research. However, back then, Facebook's independent fact-checkers, they decided to label the documentary as being false. They said that the theory had already been debunked, that it was not allowed to be discussed on their platform, and then they buried our documentary. It was still on Facebook, mind you, but they just put a fat fake news label over top of it, which essentially killed its distribution. Now, that was the case for a very long time until just about a month or two ago. Very mysteriously, almost on a dime, the entire narrative changed. And in fact, when I interviewed Miss Natalie Winters, who's an investigative journalist with the National Pulse, we discussed exactly this topic. I mean, we were, of course, doing this research for a while. We published that documentary, and we've been publishing a series of articles on that topic. But it seems like, well, they were getting censored, and the mainstream media was calling it a conspiracy theory. But it seemed like that one Wall Street Journal article, for some reason, was accepted by the mainstream, and it changed everything. But when you look at that article, I'd really like to get your opinion on it. Have you read that article?
Yeah.
So it seems to me like what they did is they took that already publicly available report from one of our intelligence agencies, which said that there was 3 scientists within the Wuhan lab that developed
the State
COVID.
Department.
The State Department.
Cable, yes.
So that there was that they already had COVID-like symptoms back in, I believe, like December, November of 2019, right? But that was already publicly known for a very long time. But the Wall Street Journal, they came out and they said, oh, we saw some other unclassified documents that corroborated it or something like that, but they didn't even give too many details. What do you think made the narrative shift? Because to me, at least, when I read that article, they didn't really introduce any new evidence that wasn't already publicly available in February, but suddenly everything changed. What do you think led to that?
That's been really a major source of headache for us at the National Pulse, and I'm sure you guys too, is that these mainstream media outlets are reporting stuff that we reported ages ago, but they're kind of missing the point. And I think that there's a lot to unpack there. I've talked on your program before about the mainstream media's ties to the Chinese Communist Party and why they wouldn't be so inclined to really report on the true origins of the virus. But I think what the mainstream media really realized and recognized, and frankly, the polling shows it. I think just yesterday a report out of a Harvard-Harris poll showed that the majority of Americans, Republicans and Democrats, believe that COVID-19 originated in a Chinese Communist Party-run lab. And I really think that what the mainstream media is trying to do now is get ahead of the narrative and seize it and make it so the American people will believe that it was an unintentional lab leak as opposed to a intentional lab escape, that the Chinese Communist Party had planned for this virus to be released. And I think that what you saw is that the mainstream media, whether it was the Wall Street Journal, CNN, MSNBC, even Vanity Fair put up a very good article, I would say, kind of chronicling the origins and really the cover-up of the virus. But I think that they really don't want the American people to understand that this virus was intentionally released by the Chinese Communist Party. So I think that because the polling is starting to shift, they'll take the lab leak theory. You know, maybe that's the extent that they're willing to go. But it really is mind-boggling. Even when you have, like you said, you know, State Department cables, official government sources documenting whether it's sick researchers or these, you know, covert biological weapons programs that had horrible safety protocols and precautions, that the mainstream media would ignore that for so long. It's nothing new. We know the mainstream media lies to us, you know, bald-faced lies day after day, but I think COVID-19 really raised the stakes because you saw how it affected, you know, really the health and lives and well-beings of so many Americans. So it's really infuriating, I think, the way that the media handled it. But as someone who really tracks all the ways that the Chinese government seeks to not just infiltrate, but really influence the narratives that come out of our mainstream organs, it's not a surprise.
Now, as we mentioned in that interview, U.S. intelligence agencies have recently admitted to not knowing where this virus originated from. In fact, here's a statement that was released from the Assistant Director of National Intelligence for Strategic Communications. The U.S. intelligence community does not know exactly where, when, or how the COVID-19 virus was transmitted initially, but has coalesced around two likely scenarios. Either it emerged naturally from human contact with infected animals, or it was a laboratory accident. That assistant director then went on to say that two elements of the intelligence community lean toward the infected animal scenario, while one element leans toward it being a laboratory accident. She added that furthermore, they do not believe there is sufficient information to assess one to be more likely than the other. And it's worth noting that we should draw a very clear distinction between two different scenarios that often get lumped and mixed together. Because there is a level P4 virology lab over in Wuhan that studies, among several other things, coronaviruses, just like mentioned in these documents here. And that in and of itself is not too weird. I mean, countries routinely study these types of viruses for defensive purposes. And it might very well be the case that some virus that was being studied at the Wuhan lab was accidentally released to the public. Now, that is a very different scenario than the Chinese Communist Party developing a virus as a bioweapon and then releasing it to the world. Those are two completely different scenarios, even though over the past year, independent fact-checkers have generally lumped these two together and said that the entire thing is a conspiracy theory that's been debunked. Regardless, let's actually go through some of the facts. So this here is a report that was released by the House Intelligence Committee, and it concludes that it's more likely that the virus originated within a Chinese lab rather than coming from some animal in the wild. Here's what it reads in part. There is overwhelming circumstantial evidence to support a lab leak as the origination of COVID-19. By contrast, little circumstantial evidence has emerged to support the PRC's, which is the People's Republic of China's claim that COVID-19 was a natural occurrence having jumped from some other species to humans. Now, as you likely already know, COVID first made its appearance over in Wuhan, which is a city in central China, and that was back in late 2019 when there emerged a cluster of cases which were back then linked to a local wet market. And just for your reference, a wet market is where they sell things like fresh meat, fish, produce, etc. Now, the official narrative from the Chinese Communist Party was that this virus came from some kind of an animal at this market, either a bat or a pangolin. And so with that, they sent the entire world on a wild goose chase. And in my opinion, that is due to the fact that people forgot that communists, they lie like people breathe. Regardless, to this very day, which is now more than a year later, a year and a half later, the true origins of the virus still are unknown. Although the focus has now officially shifted towards the theory that the virus leaked from a laboratory at China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, with things like this 900 pages of released documents pointing more and more to that possibility. And for your reference, by the way, this Institute of Virology is home to China's only P4 lab. And P4, by the way, represents the highest level of biosafety. And what a coincidence it is that it's located right up the road. The only P4 lab in the entire country of China is located right up the road from the Wuhan wet market. And according to a fact sheet from the State Department, which by the way was released all the way back in January, it says that this virology lab has been conducting experiments on bad coronaviruses starting as far back as at least 2016, although this would suggest it's as early as 2014. It also suggests that this institute in Wuhan has also carried out laboratory animal experiments for the Chinese military since at least 2017. Furthermore, and again, this information was released all the way back in January, the State Department document states that several researchers at the Wuhan laboratory, they became sick with symptoms being very similar to those of COVID all the way back in autumn of 2019, and they went to the hospital. which, by the way, that document directly contradicted claims which were made by senior researchers from the Wuhan laboratory who said that there were no infections among the scientists on staff. But that, again, just goes right back to the fact that you cannot trust anything that comes out of a country ruled by a communist party. That's just my opinion. Now, it should be worth noting that it isn't necessarily unusual for people in China to go straight to the hospital when they get sick. And also, COVID has very similar symptoms to the flu, such as fever, aches, a cough, and so on. And so the fact that these researchers got sick and went to the hospital doesn't definitively prove anything. However, consider the fact that members of the same research team, who are again working with these coronaviruses in Wuhan's only P4 level lab that is right down the street from the wet market, all went to the hospital with similar symptoms, which are the exact same symptoms for COVID, right before the pandemic first began. That is, if nothing else, cause for an investigation. However, David Asher, who actually led a State Department task force on the origins of the virus under Mike Pompeo, he said that he doubted that the lab researchers became sick because of the ordinary flu. Here's what he said during a speech. "I'm very doubtful that 3 people in highly protected circumstances in a level 3 laboratory working on coronaviruses would all get sick with influenza that put them in the hospital or in severe conditions all in the same week. And it didn't have anything to do with the coronavirus." He added that these researchers in the Wuhan lab in late 2019 may have represented the first known clusters of COVID-19 cases. And so again, all this information was released back in January. However, it was not until the Wall Street Journal broke a story which revealed further details about these researchers from a previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report, which actually went deeper into than the State Department document, that this story actually broke into the mainstream. That undisclosed intelligence report revealed more details about the number of researchers, the timing of their illnesses, as well as the details of their hospital visits. And again, it was not only until the Wall Street Journal broke that story that social media companies allowed us Americans to once again discuss this topic. Now, in terms of what that intelligence report specifically said, well, thus far, unbelievably, we actually don't know because it is still classified. However, some people are trying to change that. For instance, over in the U.S. Senate, they unanimously passed a bill which would require the Biden administration to declassify all intelligence related to the origin of the virus, including information about what happened over at the Wuhan lab at the very start of the pandemic. Here's what Senator John Hawley, who sponsored this bill, had to say about it. "The American people deserve something else. They deserve to have this government hold accountable that nation which started this virus, whose lies about this virus turned it into a global pandemic, whose lies about this virus prevented our country and many others from being able to address it effectively in time. Of course, I'm talking about China." He then added that this bill will give an opportunity to the American public to evaluate the evidence for themselves. However, almost unbelievably, even though this bill passed the Senate unanimously, with both parties voting in favor of it, it was killed in the House. House Democrats, for some reason, they blocked this bill which would have declassified what the intelligence community knows about the origins of COVID-19, which leaves us, the American people, with no choice but to keep digging and to keep researching it ourselves. If you'd like to read more and dig deeper into anything that we've discussed in today's episode, I'll throw all those links into the description box below this video so you can check them out for yourself. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick second to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Now, lastly, as I've already mentioned in several previous episodes, on the very same day that Joe Biden was sworn into office, YouTube made the unilateral decision to demonetize our program. We can now no longer run any ads before, during, or after our episodes, and the Super Chat feature has mysteriously been disabled. They are trying to essentially snuff out our independent journalism. However, we here at the Epoch Times, we did not take this lying down, and instead we worked to create something very cool. It's called Epoch TV. It's a brand new, no censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epoch Times video content, like The Larry Elder Show, American Thought Leaders, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, as well as my show, Facts Matter, and on there I publish exclusive episodes that, frankly, I do not feel comfortable publishing here on this platform. And also, you can find all of our awesome documentaries over on Epoch TV, including the one we mentioned earlier, the one where we tracked down the origin of the Wuhan coronavirus. Even though we made it a year ago, the information there is still amazingly relevant today. You can find it over there. And if you'd like to check out Epoch TV, I'll throw a link to it right there at the top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you check out all the awesome content down there and join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed. while YouTube still allows it. Also, smash that notification bell as well so you can be notified of any new videos as we release them. And then lastly, if you have an Instagram account, consider following me at Epoch Times Roman. I publish behind-the-scenes research as well as spicy memes. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.